Welcome to Between the Lines. My name is Advait Kurlekar. My colleague here is Eklavya Malhotra. We represent a company called Apohan Management Consultants. And as a co-curricular activity, as always, there are large number of new faces here today, especially, as expected. So for people who have not attended our program earlier, just a quick intro. We've been organizing this program called Between the Lines for some time now. It's a monthly, free, open for all kind of program. Every month, we identify a book that we believe is a good book to read, more often than not, recently published book. And for people who've been here for many times, we all know how Eklavya presents a summary of the book. Fantastic summary of the book, which I'm sure he's going to do today. He's a little bit tense because the author is here. And then, depending on the topic of the book, we invite people from the industry and I moderate a panel discussion on the book. Like many of you have seen in recent times, we've been lucky and getting luckier every month that we've got authors in the room and therefore the format changes. Many times we've had author along with panelists, but given the author today, we said we don't want to share the author with anybody else on the time. So after Eklavya's summary, we're just going to have a one-on-one chat with RG, and of course I'm going to introduce him. Not that he needs an introduction, but I'll still do those 3 lines. So once again, thank you so much for coming out in large numbers here. And I know there are many people who are still coming in based on the calls I've got, but we'll still start. And just for the record, this is our 109th Between the Lines session. So thank you.
Thank you. I somehow can't understand why so many people have showed up today and not for the other events. I wonder what it is about Jamshedji. Okay. Is it any better right now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. No, it's not that. I think the Bluetooth. Acha, within striking distance.
Aman is coming.
Any better? Should I say any worse? Yeah.
Just.
Okay, is this one better? Yeah. I'll keep this also just in case. Okay, so I know that none of you is obviously keen to listen to what I have to say because all of us, me included, just want to listen to RG. That's the only plan that we have, and we don't have him for too long a time. It's just 1 hour that we get with him. So we have to make the most of that. But again, Jamshedji, that name, once you hear it, it evokes a certain emotion. And the best part about having somebody like RG and Harish Bhatt write a book about Jamshedji is that I'm sure the two of them know enough about the Tata culture, about the Tata history, the Tata values, more than most people alive right now. And as they've mentioned in the dedication that this book is dedicated to Bombay House, I'm sure even now, long after the two of them have moved out from Tata's, a bit of their heart still resides over there, if I may say so. So there's a deep attachment which they have for the Tata Group, which comes out visibly in this book. And that's one of the reasons why we really had been waiting to do this book. And we'd been exchanging correspondence with Harish also for a few months. And lo and behold, we got RG, even though Harish was not able to make it. So it's truly a hugely humbling experience for us to have RG with us in our midst today. And to talk about the book which he has written, which incidentally is his 20th book. I mean, 20 books. That number itself calls for a round of applause. And what's remarkable about this book is that it is exactly what you don't expect it to be. This book is not a definitive biography about Jamshedji Tata, because that is what one would normally expect somebody like Gopal and Harish to write about, given their association with the group. But this book is nothing like that. The book essentially tries to answer a couple of simple questions. First and foremost, how did Jamshedji build this enterprise? And I use the word enterprise very carefully, and I think RG would also want to perhaps talk at length about what he considers to be an enlightened enterprise, because that is the kind of rarefied sort of status which the Tata Group has acquired now. And the other thing which the book attempts to also address is that fine, once he established the group, great, splendid. All that through his lifetime, wonderful. Lived on through his son's lifetime, great, would not have expected it. How did he manage to build something which has lasted for more than 150 years and continued in the same traditions as he had envisioned at the time of establishing the group? Because that is the secret sauce which is not really well known, and that is something which they have attempted to decipher during the course of their research for this book. And all of it is against the backdrop of what Gopal has coined as a SHE enterprise, a she enterprise, which essentially stands for a sustainable, honest questions which he's attempted to answer during the course of this book, which also sheds light in terms of how did the Tatas manage to build something which, first of all, was very true in terms of its commitment towards society, that yes, we will be a sustainable enterprise, we will give back as much as we take from the society within which we operate. We will be honest, that means ethics will be absolutely non-negotiable. And at the same time, we will attain that state of enlightenment, which again he writes at length about, that state of enlightenment which many companies must be aspiring to work towards, but even defining it may not be possible for most of them, barring a few like the Tatas. And what is that enlightenment state is something which I'm sure Advait would also like to touch upon during the course of the panel discussion, or rather the one-on-one with RG later on. Now, the other interesting part about this book is that they have not again attempted to do any sort of a chronological sequence of how the Tatas were formed, what happened, how did Tata Sons come about, how did they manage to get through. Because if you look at it, the Tata Group has seen so many business cycles and so many external cycles, during its entire tenure so far. They've lived through colonial India, so they've lived through colonization. They lived through, the struggle for independence. They lived through eventual independence, freedom, followed by the partition. They lived through our ill-fated gamble with socialism. And finally, they moved into the age of liberalization. Very few groups, very few companies, very few businesses across the world would be able to claim that they have also seen such kind of significant upheavals, both in the business world as well as the external world within which they operate. In fact, I think one of the things which Gopal and Harish have mentioned in the book, they've alluded to an old interview of JRD in the year 1989 on Doordarshan, when he was asked that, what does the Tata Group really stand for? Are you socialist or are you capitalist? And I think he answered something to the effect of, I don't know, we are probably socialist capitalist, because for us, both of them are equally important, but that socialism, that means, yes, we are here to create wealth for everyone, we are here to create wealth for the country, for our countrymen, that is of paramount importance. And the other thing which also comes out very striking in the book, again, they have dug out a lot of these old letters and correspondence from JRD's time, going back to Dorabji's time, Sir Nauroji's time, and right up to, even Jamshedji's time. So one of the letters which Jamshedji wrote to Lord Ray, the then governor of Bombay, it's an extremely self-aware piece of communication where he writes that whatever I'm doing, I am aware that I have been unfairly gifted by Providence. There is an unfair advantage which I have been born with, which I enjoy, and I know that when I look around in my country, most of them have nothing compared to what I have been blessed with. So it is only natural that I need to do something to either share my wealth with them or give them the opportunity also to earn wealth through job creation. And we're talking about this kind of thinking way back in the 1840s, 1850s. So clearly he was a man ahead of his time, and all of his principles have been sort of encapsulated in what the authors are calling the 10 Ps. So the book is divided into 10 chapters. Each chapter basically is worded with a word starting with the letter P. It begins with the philosophy of Jamshedji. What did he stand for? It moves on to the purpose, or as Gopal writes, niyat, which I think he probably came across the word even during his time in the Middle East. I think there's some Arabic origin also in terms of where this word came about, and how similar some of the policies, values, some of the human values we share with people in that side of the world also. And then it goes on to pioneering. That means, again, most of the things that they did, they were actually the first movers, the first thinkers rather. And then it moves on to people. And over there, again, they have made a very profound statement. I think the most favorite line that I have in this book is something which is to the effect of, people are tougher to build than factories. It's something which is so basic, and yet we often are not mindful of that. In the pursuit of profits, we often tend to forget it's the people who are going to bring us those profits over a sustained period of time. And then it goes on to other aspects. So there is progress, there is persistence, there's principles, and of course there is profits, but not in the traditional way as as most of us would interpret it. And then I think one of the stellar achievements in this book is something called perspectives, which is a panel discussion that all of us can only dream of attending. So they've actually recreated how a conversation might be if it were to take place today between the first 4 chairmen of the Tata Group. So Jamshedji is chairing this panel, and sitting across is his son Dorabji. The other person on the table is Sir Nauroji Saklatwala, who was the 3rd chairman. And the 4th occupant over here is JRD himself. And the 4 of them then proceed to have an engaging conversation in terms of what each of them witnessed during their own times as the chairman of the group, and also what they observed, presumably from heaven above, in terms of how the legacy was carried on. And each of them proceeds to give an honest and frank assessment of where they succeeded and also equally where they faltered. And I think that reading itself makes this book a mandatory read, because that singular chapter, it probably covers the entire journey of the Tata Group. I mean, right from the Empress Mills and beyond, to setting up the first integrated steel plant, to Tata Hydroelectric Power, and then Telco, all the other ventures that they got into subsequently. All of that gets covered beautifully in that one singular chapter, which is essentially about the perspectives of each of the chairmen. And in that process, also the book takes us, I cannot even say it takes us on a trip down memory lane, because none of us were alive in, during that era, or even most of us would not have been there when JRD was starting off. But the book also recreates what life must have been like for them during those days, and also the kind of issues that they must have had to deal with. Because at the end of the day, all that we are left with normally when we speak about the Tatas or any other business group that has a legacy which is as rich as the Tatas is, we normally romanticize it, and we like to always obviously sort of look up to all the great things that they have achieved, all the milestones that they have surpassed. But we often tend to forget that in the process of attaining those same milestones, they would have also had to go through those operational struggles, those red tapeism, the bureaucratic challenges, the hierarchical challenges which we face today as we are trying to take baby steps towards creating a legacy of our own. And that's something which again has been captured in the book in a very unique and different manner from anything else which you'll come across in this particular realm of Tata literature, if I can call it that, is that every single chapter, so every P that I spoke about, whether it is the philosophy, whether it's the purpose or the principles, and like in terms of pioneering, progress, people, the way they have articulated it for our understanding is that every chapter begins, first of all, with an essay from the authors, which essentially lays out the context in terms of what is their thought about that particular principle. And they also draw analogies from other famous industrialists of that era. So in fact, courtesy this book, you also get a great primer in terms of how Unilever was born, or rather William Lever's journey. You also get a deep understanding of the Hershey group, how that came about. And all these are like, probably things which we don't read often about, similar like, to the Carnegie group also. So they draw analogies, they draw parallels. They also put down basically the underlying hypothesis, which they further validate by giving 3 anecdotes to support every single principle. And their criteria for choosing these anecdotes was that one of them has to be from Jamshedji's time, or basically from that era. The other had to be from the middle years. And the third anecdote had to be from the contemporary period. And it only took a couple of chapters of reading the book that I realized that I have a flawed understanding of what the word contemporary stands for when you're talking about a group which has a 150-year-old legacy. I was expecting that contemporary would mean like in the last 10 or 20 years, but now I can understand that contemporary also means something that took place in the 1970s and the 1980s during the start of R&T's tenure. That also is contemporary for a group which has such a rich history. So every single principle gets discussed threadbare, courtesy these anecdotes, and we also get a behind-the-scenes look at some of the key people, the figureheads, who normally we don't perhaps read much about. So whether it is somebody like F.C. Kohli, or somebody like Nani Palkiwala, Darbari Sheth, Ajit Kerkar, or all the famous TAS alums like Xerxes Desai, KK, Harish Bhatt himself, we get to understand a lot about the stories behind these people, the origin stories about these people. Like, it's fascinating to read about the fact that Sumant Mulgaonkar first crossed paths with JRD when he was accompanying him in the late 1940s on a study tour to US and Europe to basically understand what was taking place in the world of, in the first world when it came to industrialization and manufacturing. And that time he was 40 years old. And JRD observed during the trip that this relatively, young person by those standards had a great eye for detail and a huge curiosity and a lot of enthusiasm to understand what were the best practices when it came to manufacturing. And at that point of time, he was working with ACC. And upon their return, I think they were returning by ship, and that's when JRD asked Sumant Mulgaonkar, how long do you want to keep making the glue that sticks the bricks together? And he gave him the chance to come and change the country or build the country as the Tatas were trying to do. And that's when he first saw that, okay, there is a spark in this boy. Then, of course, there was a lot of haggling over getting him out of ACC, bringing him in. And at the age of 43, he was made a director on the board of Telco. At 43, very few people, even in today's day and age, get to become directors. So for JRD to trust somebody at that age with little proven expertise speaks volumes about the trust that he had in somebody like Sumant Mulgaonkar, who obviously repaid that trust and faith multiple times, especially when he set up the second plant over here in Pune. And there's such an interesting story behind that also, which probably fits in with the overall purpose or the philosophy of the group. In those days, in the 1960s, when Sumant Mulgaonkar had that 800 acres of barren rocky land on which he was basically going to construct the new plant, he decided that he's going to use 150 acres of that to create an artificial lake. So the lake which we see today, the water body over there, that's not a natural water body, that's an artificial lake which was developed on his behest, on his insistence, despite everybody advising that this is sheer, for lack of a better word, wastage of money, stupidity. He went ahead, he convinced JRD, he appointed a chief horticulturalist, he got a stone masonry dam built over there at great expense, and eventually He spent 15 lakhs in those days, 15 lakh rupees, just to create that entire area, that lake and the surrounding area, which basically feeds in for all the trees which he wanted to get planted over there. Because in his own words, he wanted the plant to look more like a tree park rather than a manufacturing plant. That 15 lakh rupees investment today houses 1.5 lakh trees. And we don't know how many multiple thousands of trees which are basically growing in the other regions, and all the fruits, because they have the nursery also courtesy that. And in spite of that indulgence, JRD's lasting remarks were that building this lake was never part of our business agenda, but I'm happier than anything else that Suman Mulgaonkar went ahead and built this more than anything else that he has done in terms of building the plant. So that goes to show again how those virtues, those values which Jamshedji stood for. So when he spoke about giving back to society back in the 1800s, the same values, the same virtues, the same qualities got distilled down generations, which is remarkable. Because again, while we all like to think about Jamshedji as, it's very easy, or it's a very sort of colloquial way to say that Jamshedji started, the first integrated steel plant, or he started Jamshedpur, or, he started all these other, initial industries. But the reality is that most of them were actually started by Dorabji, his son. Jamshedji did not live long enough to see the fruition of most of his ideas. So that again goes to show that somebody like Dorabji, like many other people during those times, who were also living off, their ancestral wealth and not really doing much about it in terms of giving back to society or even building a further corpus for themselves, he still went ahead and he actually took upon all the projects which his father had started, including even the silk farm which Jamshedji started somewhere near Bangalore, simply because on one of his trips to Japan and then to Europe, he realized that silk farm is basically a cottage industry which is perfectly suited for the India that was true at that time, which meant basically we didn't have the talent, we didn't have the capital. He went on his own expense to Japan, got experts from there to move to India, the same way as he presumably got Charles Page Perrin to move from New York to come and set up the steel plant over here. He went, he got them, he got the first silk farm which was started over here in Bangalore, and all of this was done with a singular agenda. He wanted to create, or he wanted to reignite cottage industry in India. It had nothing to do with textiles, which he was dabbling in mostly at that point of time. It had nothing to do with his dream and vision of setting up a steel plant. And yet he still wanted to do it, and his son continued it for many years, simply because they felt that this is something which the country will benefit from. And in a similar vein, when Dorabji lost his wife to leukemia, which was probably one of the very first documented cases of cancer in India, and that's the time when he realized that India is lagging behind so many years in terms of even understanding what cancer is, that he went ahead and decided that he will set up an institute, which initially was going to be the Radium Institute only, but then later on became what we know as today as the Tata Memorial. He went ahead, he insisted that he will pledge all his money towards that, and he also left all his money to the Dorabji Trust. When he was no more, that project was still carried forward by the next chairman. And when they were told during a board meeting that this idea is not feasible, it's going to cost you so much, I think it was some 30 lakhs of capital which they had to put in back in the 1920s, in the late 1920s, in those days when the world was reeling under an economic depression. The Tata Group had barely survived the First World War. At that point of time, the chairman of the board turned around and said, he thundered, "Do you think Jamshedji would have ever said that we will not put money for a venture like this?" And he went ahead and sanctioned the amount. All of these and many more anecdotes which we find in the book are all a testimony to the fact that there is something, when we say that the Tatas evokes a sense of affection among all of us, even those of us who have nothing to do with the group whatsoever, and yet we feel a strong sense of affinity towards them, the book only serves as a fitting reminder why it evokes that feeling, and more importantly, as is also the postscript of the book, Powerful Learnings for Corporate Success, the book also gives us some idea. I mean, it does not give a prescriptive remedy because that's impossible. I don't think any business will be able to emulate what they have managed to achieve, but at least it lays down in easy to understand terms what the thought process might have been of these great visionaries that have shaped the Tata Group. And as I said at the beginning, one of them is right here with us today. So without further ado, we move on to the main feature of today's session, the discussion with RG. Thank you all so much.
So he's here. He clearly doesn't need any introduction, but from a formality's sake, happy, and I don't really have any words to express my only gratitude for him to spare his time, because at people of his stature I was talking to him earlier, become more busy when they retire. And that's what has happened to him, because too many people want him and his knowledge and kind of thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan.
Thank you. We're going to have a conversation, or if you wanted to say something about the book or what?
You can start.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. Thank you all very much for being here. And while I love to believe that I'm so popular next to Shah Rukh Khan, that all of you have arrived here on a weekday.
No comparison.
The fact of the matter is, truth be told, the story is fantastic. I happen to have the fortune of being the storyteller. So it's the kahani that's important, not the guy who's telling the story. My co-author is not here, so I keep using the word me and I, but please read it as we and our. And I was very struck when I joined Tata. I joined at a rather late age, as my friends Casey and Raman and so on know, about 52. When you tend to be a bit wise, you think you're wise at least, and maybe a touch of cynicism or skepticism. Not as you are when you're 25, green under the ears and everybody is a hero for you. And I was very struck by several features of Tata. And I spent a lot of my non-working time trying to understand कि ये सोने की चिड़िया है तो ये सोना है कहाँ? I can see the chidiya. And it is therefore for me an act of love. You may say, after all you work for Tata, of course you'll have love. Everybody who works for a company doesn't have love for the company. Everybody who stays married to somebody for 30 years doesn't have love for the other person. So the truth is, for me, it was an act of love of saying, ये चीज़ क्या है? किसको समझ में आता? Even people within Tata don't know about Tata. That's not unusual, by the way, not to know what's closest to you. Fish doesn't recognize water. You have to train the fish to recognize water. And Harish, on the other hand, my co-author, joined at 25, green under the ears. And for him, this is the mandir. And so we made an odd combination, but a value-adding combination, because there was a lot of tu-tu mai-mai going on in this exercise. And I must share with you, since I'm speaking here and Harish is not here, what is it that I found so unique about Tata? You know, I've done a rough calculation, don't hold me to it. If I could put together all the people who are alive and retired from Tata, or former Tata employees, retired or resigned and moved on, and I add the number of people who are today in service, you'll come to about 1.5 million people. If I multiply, that doesn't mean the total passage has been 1.5, because many people have passed away. That's a hell of a number. 1.5 million people. If I multiply that 1.5 by 4 or 5 as a family size, about 6-7 million people directly, if I may use the cliched expression, Tata ka namak kha rahe hain. And if I add the added ecosystem of vendors, suppliers, distributors, I'm sticking my neck out. It'll probably close to 20-25 million. It'll be bigger than the city of Pune. That is astounding. Astounding. And I was very struck by how the hell did this happen? One unusual feature that struck me, it's not that Tata is the perfect employer. There are lots of things wrong in Tata also. But there are a hell of a lot more things that are right about it. And the balance, it's like, you know a friend, there's nothing perfect about a friend. But if there are more positives and negatives, you stay friends. So in the book, we've actually acknowledged and found what happened when something went wrong. And when something went wrong, basically Tata got up and said, hey guys, sorry, made a mistake. Now let's make up for this. Rather than it going to High Court, Supreme Court, going round and round in circles without anybody understanding what's happened. I'm a very, especially since I've retired, I have nothing better to do, very fond of reading biographies. And I constructed this model in my head, which is true, though when I tell you it will look very dramatic. All drama is not untrue. Some dramas are untrue, but this drama is true. Andrew Carnegie is remembered in the US or globally as a steel magnate. Thomas Edison is remembered as the father of electricity. Henry Ford is thought of as the father of Model T and the automotive industry. DuPont, E.I. Denamore DuPont, is remembered as a chemical giant. Johann Tripp is remembered as the guy who started Pan Am. You remember Pan Am, an airline which doesn't exist anymore? And he's the father of aviation. Conrad Hilton, who married Zaza Gabor and came into a lot of Bombay Times type of publicity, started a Hilton chain. Thomas Watson, Senior, started information processing. Sam Walton started retailing. And Bob Noyce started chip making. And today's world, these are giants who are written about. Each one merits a volume of 200, 300 pages. And I said, here is Tata. It's not one man, mind you, but over 150 years, he's done all of that. India's answer to all these wonderful people, and I'm using, is this firm, this business. So it is not that Jamshedji Tata did all this. It's not that only chairman did it. A lot of soldiers who are not written about, some who are written about occasionally, and some who are written about a bit more. And that is astounding. Another statistic caught my eye. We all know that Fortune 500 list changes. Every 10 years the list changes. It's very tough to stay on top. I said, what happened in India if there's a Fortune India 500? 1939 was the first time business houses in India were ranked. And I think the colonial government did it to find out who all are earning money and giving it to the Congress party for the independence movement. But that's my surmise. A list was published by His Majesty's government, and Tata was on top with a total capital of 24 crores. 1969, independent India, now socialist government, wanted to know who are the monopolists, the big bad guys who are connected companies and making all the money. So before legislating the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, they said, find out the big guys. Bade machhi kahan hai? Ek number ka machhi turned out to be Tata. along with that came many restrictions and penalties, but that's not the subject of today. Of course, since liberalization, every magazine, there'll be a Lokmat series of the world, India's biggest businesses, 2 Times of India. Everybody has an award. And if not the first, second, somewhere Tata keeps coming. Either Tata as a group or Tata as a... So to reach the top is easy. To stay on the top for 85 years is tough. Nobody in the world has done it. And Tata never set out to do it. I believe in life's principle of obliquity. If you want to go here, sometimes you have to go this way. In billiards or snooker or carom, you play this way to net it. And I've never seen a piece of paper or a statement by anybody saying we want to be in the top. But it seemed to be, try to do the right things and maybe you'll end up on top. That struck my mature mind. I came at 31 years in Unilever as being very, very unique. And these stimulated the mystery because, the past is history. The future is a mystery. Only the present is ecstasy. So you have to live in the present. And while the cover of this book may give the impression it's about history and past, that is just to show awqat. It is really about the future. What is it that this group is trying to do? And that is what has come into the 10 Ps that were mentioned a few minutes ago. I could go on and on because when a subject has been sloshing around, I retired in 2015 and I've written many books, but this book was sloshing around in my head. I just could not get myself to say what will be distinctive and different compared to Frank Harris's biography or our very distinguished late Rusi Lala. And it struck me that if you slice this fruit differently, it's like a chef. He cuts the same Alfonso mango in a different way, it looks like a lotus. And of course, he'll charge you 1,000 rupees for it if you went to the Taj. And please do eat such a fruit in the Taj. It helps me to get my pension. But slicing a fruit in different ways is an interestingly creative process. And I wanted to take this huge melon called Tata and slice it in a different way to say, does it give you some insight? If I'm a young entrepreneur who's 25 today, or I'm in a family business, chances are I want to create a long-lasting enterprise. I want to create an enterprise which people admire. But I also want to create an enterprise which people love. Is it possible to admire a company? Yeah, you can name me 10 companies because if you're competent and efficient, people admire you. What makes a person love a company? Love is a very fuzzy thing. You can love a human being, but to love a company? And I've done this exercise, I've not published that in the book. Tell me which companies you respect. And on the x-axis I put them and I get a number of names, 9, 10 out of 10. I say, how many companies do you love? And the group immediately breaks out saying, how can you love a company? And then they will come in with some names. How many companies can you respect and love? And I used to pilot something called the Tata brand study. Twice a year we used to, it's like a Pew survey. And I was amazed. Actually, I was shocked. I consider myself a marketeer. कि ये ऊपर कैसे आता है? It is just like something that pops up. Despite controversies that were contemporarily going on at that time, like Tata Finance, like Indica, my friend Girotra and all were there, they will recognize what I'm saying. I mean, there were negative stories coming about. But Tata, there might be a blip, but because the way they behaved, people popped them back again. And therefore, to earn trust is the modern biggest challenge in society, in politics, in community, earning trust. And everybody asks me when I go to B schools, how do you earn trust? And I say the only way, I don't have any silver bullet, but to do what we all do to earn trust of your family, of your friends, which is to behave the way you think and to think the way you ought to behave. It's a virtuous cycle. Occasionally the people can tolerate an aberration. कभी कभी गुस्सा हो जाता है. But I encapsulated it that India's industrial policy requires to nurture she companies. Sustainable, humane, not honest by the way, humane and enlightened companies. And of course, that occupies my mind now. What is sustainable, what is humane, and what is enlightened? But we won't go into that now. Perhaps I should stop there.
No, you can continue.
And say thank you very much, all of you, for coming here. And even at the risk of your thinking, ये टाटा वाला रिटायर करके टाटा की बातें कर रहा है, I can tell you, it's a wonderful story. And not because I want you to buy the book, but if you do buy the book, please read it. Okay.
Great. So let me start with the first question I had for ever since we decided that we are going to do this program. You know, there are many Tata veterans in this room, including yourself, KC, Raman, and some others. I spent less than 2 years in a Tata company, and yet after 30 years of those 19, 20 months, how do I still have that soft corner for Tatas? So what makes Tata Tata?
You love your first girlfriend, that's all. It is true. I was light-hearted. I have met many people who moved on from Tata for various reasons, which are not germane to go into now. I didn't get this promotion, I didn't become DGM, AGM, whatever. But they still love the place. They even might have felt that they were not treated properly by a particular boss. But they love the institution. That's why I said, it's like your first girlfriend.
Okay.
For those who have left. And for those who stay on, it's like your lovely wife.
But again, the question is, you know, the book obviously it says that while it's a Tata story and wonderful stories are there, the tagline is that it carries a legacy for other companies to imbibe. Now, how has the group managed to continue with this kind of legacy for nearly 160 years now? Because with every change in management, whether it's at the chairman, chairperson level, or variety of those 80 companies who have their own individual managements and boards, how do you ensure that that legacy continues generation after generation? And I don't know, in 160 years, how many generations are we talking of, but presumably 15 generations now. How does that happen?
This is central to what preoccupied me. They do studies in Japan. How do human beings live for 120 years? They'll go to some island in Okinawa. They'll find that they all get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They do exercise. They eat fish. They have a stiff whiskey in the evening. Then they'll write a book. This is the way to live 120 years. It's called Ikigai, Ayurveda. You can give it any name you want. And what is the Ikigai or the Ayurveda of Tata was something that was central to this book. And one of the things we had to be very careful about, because I've spent 18 years, though I was fortunate to spend it at a helicopter level. And Harish spent 37 years, and he came up from a trainee all the way up. So we had different perspectives of similar events. But what I think Tata is doing, and people in Tata are not aware of it. I suspect Raman and KC will go back and say, I thought he's bullshitting, but maybe he's got a point. I have created the metaphor and I take the responsibility for it. And if you think it's a good metaphor, then I'll take the credit for it. You take any religion in this world. Somebody came with a very elementary and simple philosophy. Humaha, Hukta, Havarshta, if you are a Zoroastrian. 10 Commandments, if you are a Christian. I won't go into every religion because if I get something wrong, I might create a riot outside. So I'll just stop there. Then that simple philosophy is like the Gangotri or a Talakaveri if you go to south. At this beginning, Ganga looks so simple. It is absolutely pure and pristine. You can't get purer than that. Melted snow coming through a little orifice. That's called Gangotri. And that's why we worship it. You must worship your purpose. In Japanese, they call it Ikigai. By the time it comes down to the plains, near Badaयूं, Agra, it's a mighty river. It has come through a very tortuous hydrology. But it is now a mighty river with lots of currents, undercurrents, dangers if you're trying to cross it. But there are lots of stories around it. The world's greatest rivers gave the greatest stories. The pharaonic civilization came on the Nile. The Mesopotamian civilization came on the Euphrates and the Tigris. I don't want to educate you because I don't need to on the Gangetic civilization because that's our inheritance. And that is where Tata is now. There are stories, there are icons, there are narratives which are alive. You see, if nobody wrote a book on Ramayana, if there was no audio book, no television series on Ramayana, you think a guy who's 15 today will know anything about Ramayana? He'll say it's something. At least grandmother put you on his lap, on her lap, and told you something, and you vaguely remembered it. So stories are good stories because they're kept alive and they're nurtured. They're nurtured because they're repeated. Perhaps with some exaggeration, some mirchi masala. And Tata's full of it. There are icons. So although the cover picture is of Jamshedji Tata, I think he rattled off many icons. Fakir Chand Kohli, Darbari Seth, Suman Mulgankar, Rusi Modi. All of them were not equally iconic. Some of them were controversial. But by God, icons they were.
Yeah.
About that, there is no doubt. And there are so many narratives about these people. Some are true, some may be exaggeration. I mean, since I'm in Pune, I don't even know if Casey knows the story. The story is that Suman Mulgankar used to vanish for lunch every day. Those who have been in Tata Motors will recognize the story. And they said, yeah, this guy doesn't look like he's got a girlfriend. He's not at that age. He vanishes at 12:30, comes back at 2:30. I wonder what he does. Then somebody followed him. And they found he goes to the dhaba on the highway close by to sit and talk to truck people कि हमारी गाड़ी में क्या तकलीफ होती है, आपका एक्सल टूट जाता है, आपका ब्रेक चलता नहीं है, etc. You heard the story, I'm sure. One of the things we've done in this book is to try to sift out the true meaning. It's got proof. There's some document. And the untrue, I won't call it untrue.
Folklore.
The factual and the folklore. भाई दोनों की जगह है. You know, if Raskan writes a poem, Tahi ahir ki chohari yan chachiya bari chach pe naach nachave, there is no proof that that happened. But you can well imagine young gopikas dancing just for chachiya bari. So we have stories. And one of the wonderful things that Tata does is to keep them alive. In a number of ways. Seniors tell juniors the stories. We have archives right here in Pune. We have documents. Every time a person goes to an induction course, he's taken to the archives, he's given a copy of the book. Every Tata employee, all these 1.5 million people I referred to, will know 2 dates. Jamshedji's birthday, 3rd March, and JRD's birth anniversary, 29 July. I worked in Unilever 31 years. I don't know the birth date of William Hesketh Lever because it's never celebrated. It's like Shraddh we do in our Hindu sanskar. You'll say, I've never met my grandfather, but I'm doing the Shraddh and I mention his name in the Shraddh. These are two big events in Tata's. When I joined Tata's, all this happened to me. And I was amazed because Ratan Tata said, you travel, you go out and figure out Tatas for yourself. I would come to Pune, it's a big place. I would go to Bhivpuri, there's a hydroelectric power station. I would go to Munnar, where there's a tea plantation. They will always end the presentation, last chart will be what we are doing for the community. Now, the first 25 charts will say we are clever guys. We have improved productivity, we have done new things, laid out a production line. Fine. I'm impressed. Thank you guys. Last chart will always end with saying community. And I was very, very intrigued. Remember, I was early 50s. I said, koi to circular hoga, head office se. He must always end your presentation. Nothing. It is almost like Atmabodh, self-awareness. And therefore, the principle that if I have to say what was the one commandment of Jamshedji Tata, it was community before business. In fact, I remember going to Meetapur, Darbari Seth's Adda, as they would call it. He said, in taking any tough decision, ask yourself 3 questions. By the way, that exists in, I think, Tata Motors also. First, is it good for the country? Second, is it good for the community? Third, is it good for Tata shareholders? Wow. Tell me which B school teaches you this. And there are multiple examples, like he just mentioned, Eklavya, where you put up a lake and trees before you grind any metal. And I can tell you many more, but I won't go into that unless there's a particular interest. So, ये कुछ अलग सी चीज़ है. Now you may not agree that maybe we have exaggerated, we have not consciously done so. But I do think this book has a future angle. India will progress with the many things that are being done and have been done, but we need she enterprises. But people must know what is she. Now you can do prachar and tell people what is she, or you can provide examples which they can emulate. It's not the only book I've written. I've written 6 other books about companies that look like they will be good she companies. They didn't exist when I began my career. And I want you to know I did not begin my career when Aurangzeb was ruling India. Although I might look like that. Marico, Biocon, TCS, Kotak Mahindra Bank, HDFC. They didn't exist when I began my career. So they were startups. And within a period of 40, 50, 60 years, they look that they could last a long time. They may still lose their way. So what is the secret sauce? I've written that in the book. But then I didn't want to start by writing about Tata because it would look like flag waving. But all that secret sauce that I researched with those companies, I said, now take a person who's 150 years old. Does that secret sauce come? Huh. So you say there must be some magic here. And as I get on in my years, it is my hope, for the sake of India, by the way, that we have a lot. India needs about 100,000 she enterprises. It's very difficult to find them. Very difficult. I'll give you one statistic. With the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises, the number of enterprises that are registered, which may be one-man shop, two-man shop, 20,000 man shop, is 63 million. 63 million enterprises are registered. Out of the 63 million, 19,000 have a capital of 10 crores. That means 62 point that million have a capital less than their chai pani ka dukan, you know.
Yeah.
Of the 19,000 that are having a capital of 10 crores, 5,000 are lifted. They are in the public domain. Of the 5,000, 100 account for all the doom dam that you see in the pink papers in the morning. Chevy, all that. 100-150 company ke liye. Are we a land of pygmies? Commercially speaking, I mean. I don't think we deserve to be that. We deserve to have.
Much larger.
Everybody doesn't have to be a giant. So I'm very hung up on, as I was telling you in the car, small giants. Giants in thinking, small in size. Your turnover may be 2,000 crores, but you deal a good, clean company. And I'd love to see a book written about India's small giants. I can tell you that the public company, of which I know a little bit and I won't go into it now, Galaxy Surfactants. I consider it a small giant. Its turnover may be 3,000 crores, its market cap is probably 4,000-5,000 crores. But it's like identifying a cricketer in college cricket, कि ये बंदा शायद अच्छा निकलेगा. You probably have some companies even right here in Pune.
Sure.
And so this has got a future angle and an old man's khwahish, a little desire in my heart that India deserves what John Marshall wrote in 1912. John Marshall was an economist, and there was a Bengali guy who was trying to become who became an economist, and he wrote a letter to John Marshall in 1912. He said, Mr. Marshall, can you tell me how India can progress? John Marshall wrote him 3 lines. If India had 100 Tatas, nobody can stop you. That's not an unfair dream and a hope.
Lovely.
Great. I'll take you back to your first few years in Tata. 30 plus years in Unilever and now nearly 20 years in Tata. So while you were in Unilever, what was your impression as an outsider of Tata? And when you joined Tata's, was there any dissonance or was there any...
A very good question. When I was outside, I saw it as a sloppy, bureaucratic, slow-moving, political enterprise.
Political
Why?
as well.
Yeah. Rusi Modi was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened to be the period. I mean, it's just a question of time. There was Rusi Modi, there was Ajit Kerkar, all that stuff was going on.
Yeah.
I was outside. I wasn't interested in Tata in any way. I said, when I joined Tata, one of my directors called me and he said, you're joining a snake pit, be careful. And if he was right, then I've learned to handle snakes. But I think he was wrong. Because if you see only the weaknesses in a person, and every person has a weakness. If you're living in the same cooperative society, which is a unique institution created by mankind where uncooperative people are put together. I mean, there is no other institution or law in this country except Gymkhana clubs, music sabhas, and cooperative societies, where people with completely different opinions get together and then now there are some cooperative societies in Bombay where people get to fisticuff, they catch hold of each other's shirt. So you will, if you've had that kind of an experience, then you think of him as a fighter cock. But when you get to know him, you say, "Bhai, banda acha aadmi hai." So that's the transition that I went through. Because I said, if they were sloppy, slow, maybe I can do something to help. Other people are working on it. But they couldn't have survived 100 years, 120 years, if that's all that they were. And if they hadn't had some problems, remember liberalization had happened in 1991. So it was showing up rather sharply because it was a cataclysmic event for most large corporations. And I was very attracted when Mr. Ratan Tata said, will you come and be part of the team to try to do something about this? He said, I recognize what you're saying. It's not that I'm putting it under the carpet, but we can do something about it. Let's do it. And then that's a whole story of what Tatas did, which is also probably in the book.
Sure. But again, you talked about facts versus folklore. So one of the things one hears that Tata started doing business because they wanted to do community service or philanthropy. How true is that? Is
No,
that
I don't think that is true.
Okay.
I think what happened was, Tata started doing business. People asking, oh, didn't you do opium? I said, listen, I wasn't around in 1850. So I'm not aware. Maybe his father, grandfather might have done opium. I'm not going to sit down 7 generations later and feel apologetic for opium. This is not colonialism by the Brits. This is, but he started his own enterprise and he got very interested in textiles. That's how we became a textile company. But after some initial hassles, which then became a hallmark of Tata's, anything we start new sounds fantastic, then we get into trouble. Indica as an example. Our whole passenger car venture is such an example. Our whole textile, we started with Swadeshi mill. But sometimes you hit the jackpot. And he hit the jackpot. And then he was able to set up Empress Mills. And that's the letter that was being read out by Ekalavya, where he said, being blessed by providence. He said, "Ye sab mere se nahi hua. I'm lucky. And why am I earning this money?" And he said, the community must be center stage. So I think, see, when you're hungry to eat, you're not thinking of community service.
Yeah.
Let's be practical.
Sure.
But when your stomach is full and you're belching, you can think of your poor cousins or brothers. I want to mention a little story, which is not in the book, but it's related to what we are talking. Swami Vivekananda, I'm a huge fan of Swami Vivekananda. And he went to the US, as all of us know, in 1893. And he gave speeches in English to American businessmen. And they asked him, Swamiji, you're saying all these, we don't understand half of what you're saying about conscience and Atma and all that stuff. We are business people. Can you tell us how we should conduct our business? What does your Vedanta tell you? Now I'm summarizing a long discourse into something which is more modern. He said, I do only 4 things. And I have adopted that as my mantra for future she companies. Number 1, be self-aware. Because your enemy is within yourself. It's not your competitor, it is not the government, it is not your neighbor. Okay. Be self-aware. Second, protect your resources. You're able to do business because of mitti, pani, hawa, people. Protect it. Third, in every action of yours, serve other people before serving yourself. He didn't say serve other people more than yourself, but serve other people before serving yourself. And the fourth, he says, whatever decision you take, howsoever tough, do it with compassion. And then, who comes to meet him? John D. Rockefeller, who must have been the Mukesh Ambani of those days, the world's richest man, or reportedly. And he said, I've come because Madame, there was an opera singer who was a Shishya. And he said, I've come because she asked me to come and meet you. Swamiji, do you have anything to tell me? They palti maar ke baithe hue the. This is taken from her diary. Huh? So I'm not sort of concocting this. I can give you the reference if some scholar here wants to know where it is from. He looked up and he said, oh, Mr. Rockefeller, I'm told you're one of the richest men in America. He said, yes. He said, are you 100 times richer than the average American? He said, I don't know, maybe. He said, are you 100 times smarter than the average American? He said, I must be, otherwise I wouldn't have 100 times the money. He says, your smartness and your money are connected. He said, of course. How can you suggest it's not? He said, is it ever struck you that you are a pipe, you are a conduit through which goodness must flow? Rockefeller, this is 1893, got up, as is reported in her diary, a bit upset at this funny, strange conversation. And he walked away. He came back 3 weeks later and he put down a check for $5 million and said, are you happy? He said, happiness lies within yourself, not within me. He said, I don't understand, you're going round and round in circles. You think about it. It took another 19 years. Rockefeller gave all his money to the Rockefeller Foundation. I had liked to believe that Swami Vivekananda had some connection with that.
Sure.
I would not say one-to-one. Just like it was Swami Vivekananda who told Jamshedji Tata Indians deserve to study science and engineering. Can you set up an institution? And the Indian Institute of Science came up. And how many years did it take since that conversation? Exactly 19
19
years.
again. So, interesting.
So, लगे रहो मुन्ना भाई इस पार्ट ऑफ टाटा यार होता है कभी कभी चलता भी नहीं है then you have to close it down.
Yeah. But now, my question is for not just large companies, even you mentioned the next giants kind of thing, relatively medium-sized companies. Without being overawed by what Tatas have done, how can they still imbibe something from them? And
Well, read the other 6 books. Well, you'll think I'm a fantastic book salesman. Huh? I'm doing it only for Rohit's benefit.
Rohit will be happy.
Not for me. So honestly, I have written about all those companies. And there's a story behind that. मैं भी कहानी बहुत सुनाता हूँ, but all सच्ची कहानी है मेरी. Not like the ones you read in the newspaper every morning. I was at an academic meeting of the SP Jain, your old college.
you'll have to hold the mic a little.
Sorry?
You have to hold mic close to you at this thing because. Yeah.
So I said, what makes a good CEO of a good company and what is the difference between him and a shaper of a great institution? कोई अंतर तो है. They produce 500 pages of academic papers. Such a big pota. I said, nobody's going to read this. But I took it home and I credit myself privately कि पूरे पढ़े. आधा तो समझ में आया नहीं, academic paper. But जो आधा समझ में आया, उसको मैंने, I put it into one page. And I said, is this a compass? If I want to explore the ocean, I must have a compass. I can't take out latitude, longitude, multiply, divide. And that appears in the book. And I think that compass, with humility, I would recommend as a possible starting point.
Okay.
If there's a good company already in Pune, I'm just taking Pune because I happen to be in Pune, 50, 60, 70 years old, and they're looking to be giants of thinking and strategy and longevity, not necessarily size. Market cap and valuation is Maya. I know it helps you to buy your next Jaguar, Land Rover, please buy that anyway. But it's Maya. Value is reality. Valuation is not reality. Yeah. But anyway, I'm diverting into other subjects.
Now, since you mentioned valuation, let me ask another question that, because you mentioned that some of these companies were startups to start with within the Tata Group. Now, there's a lot of startup culture, like we all know. What can startups do and learn from a 160-year-old super great grandfather?
भाई आपके हर सवाल के लिए मेरे पास आंसर भी है. I've written another book, Wisdom for Startups from Grown-ups. Rohit can supply you.
Yeah.
थोड़ी तो कमाई हो जाए, इतना समय निकाल के यहाँ आए हैं.
Some excerpts on that.
So, basically the essence of the book, startups are like young boys who have just come back from Princeton where their father managed to send them. And they think Dada was sitting on a gaddi, old-fashioned way, and my father, he's got purane ख्याल के, हम Princeton से आए हैं, हम ये करेंगे, वो करेंगे. There's a tension that happens. But what I've said is, there are things you can learn from your grandfather, and you have to be observant. You can't just dismiss grandfather as totally useless if he has built something of an institution. But you must have the ability to discern what you need not learn from him. If he wears a dhoti and a topi and sits in a gaddi, you don't have to do that. If you want to do it, but you don't have to do that. But if he has maintained the family's honor under some circumstance, and that could have happened in any business, if he has said, "Mera zaban hai, kagaz nahi hai," that's a value. Then learn that from your grandfather or your father. But we are probably in an age of artificial intelligence, and youngsters are infatuated. They have suspended their natural intelligence. But I tell them, use your natural intelligence. Mankind would not be where it is now had there not been natural intelligence. We manage perfectly well, and artificial intelligence may come. Tomorrow morning my article will appear in Business Standard that artificial intelligence will always need to be enhanced with human consciousness. I'm not being Vedantic, but human consciousness. And I think it is that intuition, that reason why you don't know. I want to tell you a story. Oh, can I?
Yeah.
ये बहुत हो रहा है. There is a guy whom you never heard of. Sorry?
Mike.
Yeah. If I'm not audible, somebody please wave. There's a guy called Stanislav Peskov. None of you has heard of him. He was a Soviet scientist in the old days, and he designed an OCO system. OCO is Russian for early warning system. So if a ballistic missile is coming towards your country, it will blip. It was a very advanced, this is back in the 80s. And they said, you be in charge of this. And if you see American missiles coming, remember this is Cold War time, here's the chain of command. And if it goes to the boss man, he'll press the button, nuclear war will begin. So one day he was sitting, it's all automated. He had certified his own invention or construction, design as foolproof. It blipped. And it meant that 5 ballistic missiles are on their way to Russia. Something in him said, यार मैंने तो डिज़ाइन किया, मैंने इसको सर्टिफाई किया, लेकिन कुछ गड़बड़ लगता है, ये ठीक नहीं है. He rang up his boss, he said, I'm required to tell you, I'm telling you, but I think it's a false alarm. That message went all the way up, the button wasn't pressed. And the world was saved from what Robert Oppenheimer has said in this film, I am death, the Bhagavad Gita moment I call it. Now what made him do that? That we will never know. But my surmise is that human consciousness. And when the whole papers were opened up, I used to travel a lot to the Soviet Union in those days, but of course I didn't know it because these are all secret papers. Many years later it got opened, only in the last 7, 8, 10 years. This chap was still alive. So they went and asked him, what made you take that decision? He said there was something about it, I don't know what. But the one thing I remember, I did not want to be, he was 75 or something by this time. I did not want to be remembered as the guy who started the Third World War. Which would have happened.
Yeah.
Now I wish that consciousness will come to Middle East today because there's so many unfortunate things happening, but nothing to do with the book, so I will not go into that area.
Fair enough. Before I have a few more questions, anybody from the audience has any question? Okay. I have my next question, which I
You don't have to ask all the
No.
If you're liking it, go ahead. Otherwise
One more
try.
unique thing about Tata Group is their long association with another business group, which is the SP Group. And of course, it has gone through ups and downs, and hopefully things are better now. Do you see that? Because we don't see that happening in any other corporate where two big giants are actually working together at the shareholder level, at the board level. How did that happen, and how did it continue, and do you see that as a takeaway for others? Is that collaboration kind of thing?
No, I don't think so. I don't know why you call it unique. I mean, the shareholding of Shapurji Palanji in Tata Sons happened through a set of quirks and accidents. So to now ascribe a great foresight and strategy would, at least I would not like to do that. It has had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
And if I may say so, that boy was young, he was 23, this girl was beautiful, she was 20, they got seduced, they had their differences, they had some kitpit, but now things are settled down.
Sure.
घर की कहानी है.
But we don't see that in other corporates where, two corporates are sort of, in a way, intertwined at the top.
I don't know, maybe there are, I can't offhand tell you. Because what's happening now is the other way around. A single corporate is breaking up because there are brothers and sisters and so on. But those are separate subjects.
Sure. Okay.
You find the concept of a joint venture has been there for a long time. You have to understand one thing about Tata Sons. I'm expressing a very personal point of view. One of the reasons why Tata has been able to take this river from Gangotri through the plains of Bundelkhand in UP, going towards the delta, at some stage it has to end, is because the parent is private.
Okay.
And the sons are public. There is no other corporation in the world where that is the case.
Okay.
Again, I'm making a very bold statement. Somebody may tomorrow produce some company. So it is like a joint family, Indian joint family. दादाजी हैं, उन्होंने अपनी मेहनत से बिजनेस बनाई. अब 4 बच्चे हैं, उनके 3 बच्चे हैं. हर एक को अपना अपना बोला है, अपनी पढ़ाई करो, तुम अपना मिठाई शॉप करो, तुम ये करो, वो करो. बट घर का जो फैमिली का जो इज्जत है वो that is not to be compromised. This, I feel it is very important for Tata Sons to be private, and that has been maintained. I just thought I would mention that in passing.
In today's modern world, how much of this Tata legacy, Tata culture, in your view, is still relevant? Because, younger generations says that, unki kahani mat bolo. They were in different age, they were different people. We are different, our needs are different, the economy is different, market is different. So we can't really live by those standards. Is it a fair point, or would you have something?
I don't blame younger people. After all, I have to think back when I was 20, how was I? Did I tell my dad I'm going to follow everything you did, or my grandfather? I didn't. So there is a generational shift. But as you grow older, you realize ki, what is the essence of you that should not change? And that is what you have to take from grandfather. The essence. The essence is not मैं धोती पहनता हूँ, टोपी पहनता हूँ. That's not the essence. But ज़बान, इज्जत, fair dealing with your employees well. Those are all what I call essential. And पोशाक, which city you're living in. I mean, if all of us wanted our children, like our grandfather say, इसी गांव में रहो, वहाँ पे घर ले लो, we'll all be still living in villages. And Pune will be a nice retired people's little place. But it is not. So, like a swan is able to separate the milk from the water, we must be able to separate the true values, which I'm hoping the book illustrates, over 150 years hasn't changed. And I was lucky, I worked in another company. They're still doing what William Hesketh Lever said. He said, I want to clean the teeming millions all around the world. Whatever you may say to Hindustan Lever, आज भी वही कर रहे हैं. Life Boy soap से हाथ धो, Lux soap से मुंह धो, Sunsilk shampoo से बाल बनाओ. And Lakme or something else you put on your face to look beautiful. So there are some values which at some stage they may become irrelevant, but at least as of now they are lively. And I think Swami Vivekananda's advice, serve others before you serve yourself, is a very, very long-lived value.
And that can be imbibed in today's
It should
world
be.
as well. Should be.
And I'm hoping, you said, why did you write the book? Young people won't read it. I'm desperate for young people to read it and listen to me, like this young man here. And I hope, that's why I've just come from 2 colleges. You may say, who the hell in college is interested in Jamshedji Tata? They poke fun, some Buddha man with a cap and all that. I said, I've come here with a message. Because you're 20. You're going to be there to make she companies. We will all be dead and gone. And it's important for me to speak to you. Whether you buy the book or not, because your pocket money is not enough, that's not my subject. It's important.
Since you talked of young people, do you see them still being in awe of Tatas, the same respect?
Young people have a grudging awe of Tatas.
Okay.
I say grudging because they want, it's like when you're young, you want, how should a woman look? When you're 60, you have a different, or the other way around. Don't want to be gender biased. You know, my wife and I often discuss how somebody looked very handsome in college because he would throw his hair like Devanand. You know that those things last for, but they are in awe of ये चीज़ कुछ अलग है. But they may not. Some of them look at Bombay House and say old building है 100 साल का है. Some of us at my age say यार 100 साल का building है, कितना अच्छा building है. So,
Yeah.
modernity versus in appearance. But that's not the essence of it. Young people are in awe of it. Perhaps an awe that they don't quite relate with. Because they are in awe of startups. Some guy will get up and say Doglapan and make a big fancy story about it. And maybe there are other stories they have to listen to. It's fair enough.
Okay. Great. Any final words for?
No, I think I bored you to tears.
No.
So
I'm just mindful of the time because you said.
yeah, I have to drive back to Bombay, but I'm deeply appreciative that you all. Sorry?
Question.
Hanji.
So tell us something about the governance, which is, I think, one of the strong points of Tata, making it last more than 150 years. Anything that you can share with where you were in terms of governance?
I don't know what I will tell you which you don't already know. It's not a perfect governance. If we had perfect governance, Tata Finance would not have happened. But we are not perfect. I think the thing I like about Tatas is that when we have at fault, we say, yaar, galti ho gaya hai. This should not have happened. And we've had, I'm taking Tata Finance because it's the book. When Dorabji Tata could not pay the workers in the steel factory, he said this should not have happened. And when his wife came and said, hawk my diamonds to the State Bank, it was called Imperial Bank in those days. He said, मैं वापस लेके तुमको दूंगा. The jewelry was given only as zamanat. And it came back after 10 years.
And I think the figure was 1 crore at that point in time.
I forget the exact number, it's in the book. And the other day somebody asked me, what did the women of Tata do? I said, if you have the Jubilee diamond and your husband has screwed up his business, Mr. Baiju's wife will not give her Jubilee. Firstly, she doesn't have a Jubilee diamond. But if she had one, I don't know, maybe she would give. Who am I to say? So, I think this governance of Tatas, you will see on a day-to-day basis when you're working many of the flaws. Just like your wife sees your flaws, you don't acknowledge them. But she tolerates you. So far. But I have survived more than half a century and it's okay. When you see the bhalai in things, that's why I use the word niyat. Niyat, I don't know how it's used in Delhi. Strategic intent. It comes from the Arabic word niya. Niya means, maqsad kya hai? What is your real intent?
Purpose.
Sorry?
Purpose.
Purpose. And नीयत ठीक नहीं है तो नीति और नियम का क्या अंतर है? Today our industrial policy is full of niyam. My complaint or my suggestion, I shouldn't put it as complaint, is you got lots of niyams. Can you get some niti and ahead of that some niyam, some niyat? If the niyat, I would like the senior people in government to get up and say, we will value our she companies. And there has to be some criteria and so on, all that can be done. But we never say that. We want our largest companies, we want the latest technologies. And then when somebody is following practices which don't look like niyat to common people, ultimately there are regulators and so on, then the policy gets diluted.
Yeah.
I would like to ask another follow-up question on this. So if somebody has any the purpose or intention to go ahead, to go ahead in life with a purpose. So what your advice would be? with good niyat, with good intent, how one can go forward with the
Is good intent enough to move forward?
No, no. It is not. I'm not saying with your good niyat everything will be all right. If that's your question. आपका सवाल
सर आपने जैसे बोला नियत अच्छी होनी चाहिए और जब नीति हो मतलब with good direction how one can be
how it can be.
How do you move forward? How do you grow? With
Okay, listen. I don't want to be preachy. My niyat when I'm talking of myself now. I'm not asking you to adopt it. You may. I joined Hindustan Lever, saying ये company अच्छा लगता है. In the first 4-5 years में आज़मा के, and I would like to work for this company for as long as I can. I behaved in that way. So if he got promoted before me, I wouldn't bring down the whole roof saying this company is unfair. Today we have people who come and say, हम IIT से पास हुआ 1972 में, ये 73 में पास हो गया, ये हमारे से आगे कैसे चला गया? अरे यार IIT 72, 73 की बात, अब क्या कर रहे हो? You know, but then it happens. रोज की बात है. You walk around Pune, you'll find. Not only Pune, any other city. I said, if the niyat is good, then my niti should be good. My niti requires me to work hard, loyalty, and being truthful. When I made a mistake, I admitted it. I'm not praising myself. You asked a question, I'm only trying to reply to that. And then the various niyams of the company. And if you don't agree with some niyam, then you negotiate it with the management. But people get impatient because they get to one niyam and they get very upset. कि ये कंपनी में मैटरनिटी लीव भी नहीं देते हैं.
my question was that only.
हो गया तो आंसर दे दिया ना. बच गया.
So, I have a question which.
है?
So, because you mentioned about we made a mistake and we accepted it and raised our hand. Now, for as large a group as Tata's, how difficult was it to actually publicly say, like you said, "Galti ho gaya," and we'll correct it? Because not many companies do that. Like it's in the book that people hide.
This is where the tone is set from the top. When Tata Finance happened, I was the vice chairman of Tata Chemicals. Ratan Tata was the chairman. We were sitting next to each other. Annual general meetings going on. One elderly shareholder came and he said, "What will I go home and tell Freni?" Because I had put all my retirement money into Tata Finance. Now the correct procedure, if you go by the law, is this is Tata Chemicals, it's not Tata Finance. So don't ask me this question. That would be harsh. Here's a 80-year-old man worried about what to tell his wife. Ratan Tata got up and look at the example that it is and how it will. He didn't do it to give an example. He did it because that was him. He said, "I'm deeply apologetic, but I want to, you go home and tell Freni, not 1 rupee of what you put in will be lost by you. I stand guarantee."
Wow.
That guy, Pesi or Homi or whatever his name was, बैठ गया.
Must be in tears, yeah.
And then I told him, I said, "Boss, you don't know, will the whole be 80 crores, 800 crores, 8,000 crores? He had no idea what has hit us. 3-4 months later, after all I was on the Tata Sons board, I was sitting there, the proposal came that we have to write off 800 crores. 800 crores. We could have gone to the Companies Act restricts your liability to the extent of paid up funds. But Tata Sons, and I was very touched, if you made a mistake, you're willing to pay for it and go back and get to work. Something very impressive. So you don't have to come around with a sackcloth and say, "I made a mistake." You may have to do that also, that's a separate issue. But apne kartut se to show. And that was, I think it's in the book, Tata Finance.
Yeah. Something similar with Docomo story as well?
Docomo was not a financial jugglery. It was a business judgment error. We made a mistake by going for CDMA, probably a number of mistakes. When you make a mistake, you say there are a number of mistakes. When you do something right, you say it's my buddhi. But yes, we had, Indica wasn't wildly successful from day one, but by God, he can tell you how they worked. They sat and fixed each one. And then he said, yaar, pehle maine ye kyun nahi socha? Correct? Sorry?
Free engine replacement.
All sorts of things were done. And finally when things were set right, people said, abhi theek kiya. So it's all right. We make some business mistakes, but I'm not referring to that. I'm talking to the financial mistakes. Okay?
Sure. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank you so much.
for hosting me and for
thank
allowing
you.
me to talk about the book.
Some small kind of things from all of us.
Please look here.
Book.
ये रमन नंदा तुम्हारी किताब है इसमें?
This is a startup from Pune. He manufactures his own perfumes in Pune.
Perfume.
Perfume. So this is a perfume called Ayodhya, which is a very special perfume, especially given to you.
This side, please, good photograph.
I can now send a picture to Mr. Modi. Ayodhya मेरे हाथ में है.
And one more thing from Doubletree Hilton. So they've been our gift sponsors. So some small goodies for you.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Last time, okay.
Thank you. आइए.
Yes. Now I think you'll have to
Run.
do the autograph run.
Yeah.
We'll keep